Welcome back, Night Wanderer. Tonight, you're slipping quietly into a chapter of history they definitely forgot to teach in school. By the way, if you were actually there, you'd probably have been arrested, eaten badly preserved fish, or caught something unpleasant. But don't worry. Tonight, you're only here in spirit. Before we set off, do that slow scroll to like and subscribe, but only if these sleepy little time loops are your thing. And tell me where in the world you're watching from, and what time your clock says. It's strangely comforting knowing who else is still up. Now, lights low, maybe grab a blanket, or let your ceiling fan hum away in the background. Time to drift gently back, one step at a time. The first sensation you become aware of isn't comfort. Oh no, that would be far too easy. Instead, you're greeted by heat. Not a warm, gentle embrace, but a thick, oppressive blanket of humid air wrapping around you like wet gauze, sticking to your skin in unpleasant places. The air here doesn't move. It sits heavily, breathing shallowly beside you, lazy and indifferent. Your eyes flicker open slowly, unwillingly, blinking away crusted layers of last night's restless sleep. At first, the room appears dimly golden, a deceptive luxury offered by a thin sliver of Egyptian sunlight, slipping through an equally thin slit in the mud brick wall. You squint, adjusting your gaze, regretting the decision immediately when a beam of sunlight stabs directly into your retinas with casual cruelty. Your bed, if we can generously call it that, is less a resting place and more of a pragmatic compromise with gravity. It's a lumpy, straw-filled mat, scratchy enough to exfoliate your entire body without your consent. Every shift in position releases a faint whisper of straw, a sad sigh from a mattress that gave up on comfort long before you inherited it. Slowly, you register the textures pressed against your skin. Linen sheets, rough as unkind whispers, cling to your sweat-soaked limbs, entangled and rebellious. You untwist them, feeling grains of sand grind abrasively between your fingers. You're uncertain whether this sand invaded overnight, carried in through cracks, or if it was always here, embedded permanently into the fabric as a grim reminder of life's inevitable discomforts. Turning your head, you discover that luxury in Cleopatra's palace truly does trickle down, but only in the worst ways. Even your modest room shimmers gently with a fine coating of gold dust, remnants of extravagant makeup rituals you'll soon become uncomfortably familiar with. Unfortunately, this gold isn't glamorous. It's invasive. A constant respiratory hazard, glinting prettily in the sunlight, while slowly ensuring your lungs will someday sparkle attractively during your autopsy. Listening closely, you hear the faint, ceaseless hum of mosquitoes near your ear. These tiny winged tormentors hover with an enthusiasm that feels almost personal, eternally optimistic about drawing your blood, their tiny, piercing whine reminiscent of miniature violins serenading your suffering. You brush your hand lazily toward the sound, an act less hopeful than habitual, and predictably fail to banish your tormentors. Stretching your stiff limbs reveals a new surprise, sharp, needle-like pains along your spine. Apparently, the palace's insect inhabitants have been busy during your slumber, treating your back as their personal buffet table. Itching, irritated welts rise enthusiastically to greet your touch. Scratching brings only brief relief, soon replaced by an increasingly desperate, burning regret. Above you, the ceiling, another questionable architectural decision, is low, crumbly, and suspiciously moist. It feels oppressive, closing in gently with every passing second, quietly conspiring with gravity. You half expect it might finally decide today is the perfect day to give up and collapse on you entirely, ending your morning prematurely, though mercifully. But it stubbornly refuses to offer even that small kindness. Turning your head slightly, your eyes catch movement in the shadowy corner of the room. A scorpion, small, jet black, and brimming with confidence, strolls casually across your floor. It pauses, turning to face you directly, tiny pincers clicking with quiet menace. The insect seems almost bored, yet vaguely amused, as if evaluating whether you're worth the trouble. You hold your breath, frozen in mutual judgment. Eventually, it moves on, losing interest entirely. It's almost insulting. You exhale slowly, realizing that your only company during these quiet morning moments is hostile, dismissive, or both. Cleopatra herself has dozens of attendants and servants fussing over her every whim, yet here you lie, envied by no one, pitied by the insects. From somewhere beyond your door, muffled voices drift lazily toward you, indistinct yet laden with subtle annoyance. Palace life, you quickly learn, is never silent. There is always someone arguing, whispering conspiracies, or plotting something elaborately inconvenient, usually your next errand. The gentle murmur of gossip is constant background noise, a soundtrack of envy, intrigue, and occasional outright malice. You know well that every whisper carries weight here. Every giggle masks potential betrayal. As your consciousness settles grudgingly into awareness, another sound reaches your ears. The distant clinking of heavy jewelry. The unmistakable jingle of gold bracelets, anklets, and necklaces worn by servants far more important and considerably better dressed than yourself. It's as though the palace itself insists on continuously reminding you of your social inferiority through auditory humiliation. You sigh, resigned to reality. Luxuriating in bed was never an option anyway. The life of a servant in Cleopatra's palace grants you no gentle awakenings, no leisurely mornings. There are only chores, discomfort, and the constant, nagging sense that someone somewhere is annoyed by your very existence. Your feet touch the rough, gritty floor, still warm from yesterday's relentless sun. It's as though even the earth beneath you has no patience for comfort. Your toes immediately register scattered straw, more sand, because there's always more sand, and something unsettlingly crunchy. You deliberately choose ignorance. Sometimes knowing less is the greatest gift you can give yourself. Standing now, you stretch gingerly, muscles stiff from yesterday's labor and last night's inadequate rest. Your joints pop loudly, echoing comically against the silent walls. Even your body has found ways to embarrass you in solitude. A half-empty clay jug of stale water sits sadly beside your mat, offering hydration that tastes disturbingly of clay and resignation. You sip reluctantly, cringing at the gritty film it leaves on your tongue. Even water here seems determined to remind you of life's small cruelties. Through the narrow crack in your wall, the sunlight slowly brightens, casting golden shadows across the dusty floor. It seems cheerful enough, mocking your weary form with a radiant optimism entirely at odds with your reality. The beauty of sunrise in Cleopatra's palace is not for you. You're simply caught in its glow, collateral damage to nature's casual disregard. You straighten your scratchy linen robe, preparing mentally for the day ahead, though no amount of preparation ever feels sufficient. Beyond your door waits another long shift of fetching, cleaning, bowing respectfully, and desperately attempting to avoid eye contact with anyone who might assign you additional work, punishment, or both. For now, at least, you have this single, fleeting moment of solitude. You savor it silently, listening once more to the palace's quiet symphony of discomfort and intrigue, basking ironically in the fragile peace offered by your terrible mattress, questionable hydration, and small arachnid roommates. Still awake? I admire your dedication to suffering. There is no snooze button in ancient Egypt. What you get instead is a shout, shrill, immediate, and merciless. It's not aimed at you specifically, but at the general atmosphere of incompetence that seems to hang heavy over the palace service wing like incense made from anxiety and human exhaustion. The voice belongs to Meru, the laundry overseer, whose vocal cords have long since evolved into a weapon of sonic warfare. Her screech cuts through the air like a flint blade, scraping what little peace you had left into thin, irritable ribbons. You flinch, not because you're startled, but because your nervous system has learned to respond with fear anytime it hears the phrase, "Where is that useless rat of a servant?" You don't wait for the second shout. You already know what comes next. Personalized insults, possibly a sandal thrown with the precision of a trained assassin, or worse, reassignment to chamber pot duty. Again. So you scramble out of your not-quite bed, your knees cracking like old papyrus scrolls, and plant your feet into the unforgiving surface of your floor. This isn't the comforting chill of a marble palace corridor, no. This is compacted earth with just enough dust to imply disrepair, but not enough to be interesting. You step on something damp. It's best not to investigate. Still half dreaming, you reach for your morning wrap. A faded linen sheet that smells of old oils, roasted onions, and a dash of hopelessness. It's the same one you've worn for days, weeks, maybe. The palace does laundry, of course, but you're low enough on the totem pole that your linens are only washed when they can stand on their own from accumulated grime. As you wrap the linen around your torso with a grace you do not possess, you take a moment to rub the crust from your eyes. It's not just sleep. It's a charming little mix of sweat, soot, and yesterday's eyeliner particles you were tasked with scrubbing off the palace cat. Bastet III. She bit you twice. You were told this meant she liked you. Your hands are sticky, your breath smells like overnight decay, and your back itches in exactly the place you can't reach. You already feel like you've lost the day, and it hasn't even started. The small water basin in the corner mocks you gently. This is your designated face washing area, a shallow, chipped ceramic bowl filled with water that was probably fresh 4 mornings ago. A thin film shimmers across the surface, mysterious in origin, possibly oil, possibly mosquito larvae. Definitely not your concern. You splash it onto your face anyway. Hygiene in ancient Egypt is mostly about appearances and small miracles. You pray you don't swallow any. As you wipe your dripping face with a cloth that has ambitions of becoming sentient, you hear a tiny squeak from beneath your sleeping mat. One of the palace rats, clever, aggressive, and fat from stolen dates, peeks its twitching nose out to investigate whether you'll be the kind of person who drops food crumbs or the kind who throws things. You glare at it. It glares back. The rat wins. Before you can do anything about your rodent roommate, there's another bang from outside your door. This time, it's a polite bang, the kind of bang that says, "Good morning, we have passive aggression for you." You slide open the wooden plank of a door, truly more suggestion than barrier, and are greeted by the wide-eyed, terrifyingly cheerful face of Onipi, a girl of about 10, who delivers messages between servants like an over-caffeinated ibis. She shoves a folded scrap of papyrus into your hand, then dashes away before you can even ask what it says. You unfold it. It reads, "You are late for Cleopatra's morning scenting." She is displeased. Wonderful. You don't remember being scheduled for scenting duty, but that doesn't matter. You are now on scenting duty. You grab the small brass jar of perfumed oil you keep near the door, lemon balm and myrrh, heavy on the myrrh, and race out into the corridor. The servant wing of Cleopatra's palace is its own underworld, claustrophobic, hot, and humming with human misery. The walls are a patchwork of crumbling plaster and hieroglyphic graffiti from bored scribes. Some of it is ancient, some of it was scribbled last week. "Hotep has lice," one reads, fairly accurate. The passageway is filled with the sounds of dozens of other servants in varying states of panic. The pounding of feet, the clatter of clay dishes, the soft curses of someone who has just spilled something that should absolutely not be spilled. You duck to avoid a tray of fruit sailing past your head, thrown by a cook with opinions about grape freshness. You keep moving. The scenting chamber is located near Cleopatra's private quarters, a corridor that smells like roses, incense, sweat, and secrets. You pause at the door, compose your expression into something approximating competence, and step inside. Cleopatra is not here yet. Her arrival is always preceded by a wave of activity. Attendants arranging pillows, checking the temperature of water jugs, pre-fluffing her favorite ostrich feather fan, and making sure no beetles are visible to the royal eye. You know the drill. You stand by the table of oils, arranging them by shade and viscosity. You think about breakfast. You cry internally. Eventually, she arrives. Cleopatra, Queen of the Nile, walks into the room with the practiced grace of someone who understands that people may die because she prefers cinnamon over nutmeg. She smells like a myth. You bow immediately, making sure not to breathe in too deeply lest you sneeze in her direction and get reassigned to crocodile enclosure duty. She doesn't acknowledge you. That's good. Attention is dangerous. You perform the ritual. Anoint her wrists, her neck, the back of her ears. She lifts her arms slightly and you dab the oil into her skin, pretending not to notice the heat radiating off her, or the 3 anxious-looking scribes watching your every movement for mistakes. One drip, one wrong scent, one oily smudge on a royal robe, and you'll be scrubbing latrines with your fingernails for a month. The ceremony ends, and Cleopatra waves you away like an inconvenient breeze. You back out of the room, bowing, not turning your back until you're safely into the corridor again. Your heart thuds ungracefully in your chest. You are drenched in sweat, your own and possibly some from the room's atmosphere. You've survived. For now. Back in the service wing, you take a moment to collapse onto a small bench near the kitchens. This is your break. It will last approximately 47 seconds, long enough to contemplate the absurdity of your situation. You are, officially, one of the palace's lowest-ranked scenting assistants. You do not matter. You are paid in food, mostly, except on days where the grain shipment is late, and then you are paid in hopes and thin air. But still, you live in the palace. You've seen Cleopatra, smelled her, even. You've breathed in the same air she exhales, which probably counts as treason, but let's not dwell on that. For all your misery, you are one layer of linen and 3 bad decisions away from the throne itself. And so, with sweat in your eyebrows, gold dust in your lungs, and the faint smell of ancient citrus clinging to your fingers, you rise again. The day is just beginning. There's a strange phenomenon that occurs when you live in a place long enough. Even the most repulsive surroundings start to feel familiar, not comfortable, never that, but familiar, like a chronic itch you've given up trying to scratch. You live here now. And here is a miracle of architectural mediocrity and biological hazard. Your room is one of many servant cubicles tucked within the southern wing of Cleopatra's palace, what you might optimistically call private quarters, though privacy is more of a theoretical concept. The space is roughly the size of a modern janitor's closet, and it radiates a similar energy, fluorescently grim, though without the benefit of actual lighting. The walls are made of sun-baked mud brick, strong enough to remain upright, but porous enough to let in every grain of sand, gust of heat, and wandering insect with a dream. There are no windows. Instead, there's a strategically placed crack, an architectural afterthought, allowing the occasional breeze to snake in, hot and dry as a bone. The air doesn't circulate. It clings. It lingers. It smells faintly of oil, sweat, dust, and something else you've never identified but have learned not to question. The scent has become part of you now. It's in your clothes, your hair, your pores. If someone bottled it, it would be called Ode to Suffering. Let's talk furnishings. Your bed, if we're still clinging to that illusion, is a rectangular frame made from rough wood, splintered in the exact places your shins make contact with at night. It creaks ominously with every breath you take, as though disapproving of your weight, your life choices, or your continued existence. Upon this majestic platform lies a linen mat, lumpy and discolored from 1,000 unspoken indignities. Occasionally, you flip it over, pretending that makes it cleaner. It does not. Above you, the ceiling is a miracle of bad decisions, beams of palm wood that shed tiny splinters when it's too dry and drip suspicious moisture when it's too humid. If a scorpion ever drops on your face mid-slumber, which it will, this is where it's coming from. You've stared at these beams so many nights, you've given them names. One of them is definitely plotting something. The floor? Dirt. Packed, swept occasionally, but fundamentally, dirt. And in that dirt live your roommates. Ah yes, the parasites. Let's begin with the fleas. They are omnipresent, ubiquitous, tirelessly optimistic. Your linen sheets are their coliseum, and every night they feast. Their bites cluster in delightful patterns across your limbs, tiny red constellations mapping out your lack of status. You've tried to crush them, smother them, bargain with the gods. They always return, emboldened. Then there are the lice. Palace lice are a special breed, hardier, smarter, more ambitious. You comb through your hair with the same wooden teeth you use for kindling and pray not to hear that familiar scratching sound behind your ears, the one that starts soft, then blossoms into maddening cacophony at precisely bedtime. You've seen grown men cry from it. And the flies, oh the flies. Their devotion to your open mouth during sleep is both disturbing and touching. You are a buffet to them, a seasonal favorite. They swarm your basin, your clothes, your food. One landed in your eye once. You never quite recovered. But the true villain? Bedbugs, the aristocracy of parasites. They don't just feed on you. They linger, plot, leave notes. You found one beneath your pillow, lazily waving its antennae like a smug little landlord. You crushed it, of course. But its relatives arrived the next day, dressed in mourning, and bit your kneecap in revenge. For hygiene, you are expected to maintain presentability. A vague term interpreted differently, depending on which supervisor is judging you. You wash using the aforementioned ceramic basin, The same one you now suspect is older than most dynasties. It holds enough water to dampen your face and give you the false hope of cleanliness. Realistically, you just smear yesterday's grime into new configurations. Soap, as we understand it, doesn't exist. Instead, you rely on natron, basically ancient Egyptian baking soda mixed with ambition. It's drying, it's coarse, it exfoliates your sins. After washing, your skin feels tight enough to crack and peel off like old papyrus. Moisturizer? Please. You have oil, when you're lucky, and it smells like expired olives and sorrow. To combat odor, yours and everyone else's, the palace generously distributes crushed lotus petals, cinnamon bark, and resin incense. You burn them in small clay pots or hang sachets near your bed. All this does is create a confusing bouquet of perfume and body odor. A scent so complex it might qualify as avant-garde. And yet somehow, it gets worse. The palace has a sewage system, but you're not allowed to use it. That's for the important people. Your chamber pot, a cracked ceramic bowl that used to be used for mixing cosmetics, is your best friend and eternal enemy. You empty it daily, sometimes. If you remember. If not, it reminds you. Tooth care? There's a chew stick, an old branch frayed on one end. It works, sort of, unless you've already lost too many teeth to stone-ground barley and sweetmeats that hide bits of rock like edible betrayal. You've seen noblewomen with gleaming smiles. You suspect they have access to secret pastes. You, meanwhile, spit blood and hope it's normal. On special feast days, you might get access to a communal bath. Not alone, of course. Dozens of servants scrub themselves raw in the same soup of oils, dirt, and regrets. You leave feeling different. Not cleaner, just sloshier. As you shuffle through the servant hallways toward your next task, you pass by fellow sufferers in varying states of decay. One is picking something out of her hair with a sharpened twig. Another is holding her foot up to the light, inspecting a suspicious boil. A third is vigorously scratching his backside while attempting to look dignified. We are all equals in our misery. The palace itself, in contrast, is immaculate. Polished alabaster floors, fresh rushes, gilded columns, perfumed fountains, marble courtyards so smooth you could eat off them, and some guests do, purely for effect. None of this is for you. You travel behind it all, through tunnels and crawl spaces, out of view, like plumbing. Essential but undesired. Sometimes, as you pass the walls, you catch your reflection in polished bronze. You do not look good. Your skin is parched. Your eyelids twitch. There's a strange bump on your collarbone that wasn't there last week. You look, in short, like someone who sleeps in straw and lives with vermin. You are someone who sleeps in straw and lives with vermin. Still, there is a comfort to the routine, a rhythm to the rot. You know where each floorboard creaks, which corner harbors beetles, which beam to avoid if you don't want dirt in your eye. It is disgusting, and it is yours. Later, as you clean out your water basin with a rag that once had dignity, you spot a small gecko on your wall. It stares at you. You stare back. In this moment, you are equals, two survivors in a space that smells faintly of oil, sweat, and despair. You nod at it. It nods back. Or maybe that was a blink. Either way, you understand each other. You finish scrubbing. You breathe. You scratch. You sneeze. Another day begins. There is a very specific kind of hunger that comes from waking up in ancient Egypt. It's not modern hunger, the oops, I forgot to eat my morning yogurt variety. No, this is deep-core, sun-drenched, teeth-clenching desperation. Your stomach doesn't grumble so much as growl, like a large jungle cat with a personal vendetta against your colon. You'd think, working in Cleopatra's palace, a place overflowing with fruits, wines, and delicacies the rest of the world can only describe with adjectives like plump and forbidden, that you'd eat well. Ah, sweet, naive optimism. You are not Cleopatra, you are not a noble, you are not even one of her cats. You are a servant, and you are about to engage in an act best described as eating adjacent. Let's start with the location, the servants' mess hall. Mess, here being both a noun and an insult. It's an open-air stone structure tucked beside the kitchens and conveniently downwind from both the butchering area and the latrine pits. The air is warm, swirling with the mingling aromas of charred bread, old meat, fermenting figs, and despair. The flies are already waiting for you. They are smarter than you. They know when breakfast is served. The tables are slabs of sun-bleached limestone, rough to the touch and stained in ways you've long since stopped trying to identify. You slide into place beside other equally bleary-eyed servants, each wrapped in dusty linen and silent in the way people are when they know what's coming and still can't emotionally prepare. The food arrives in bowls, clay, chipped, and questionably clean. The contents? Well, let's examine the composition of your luxurious morning feast. It begins with barley mash. It always begins with barley mash. A sort of grayish-beige porridge-like substance that jiggles when you move it, but somehow remains sticky. It tastes faintly of mud and regret. The texture is somewhere between overcooked paste and warm farro spit. It's technically nutritious, but so is tree bark. Sprinkled into the mash are surprise guests, bits of dried onion, fragments of unground grain, possibly a pebble, possibly not. You eat carefully, not out of etiquette, but because you've already chipped a molar once this season and you're still bitter about it. Next comes flatbread, handed out by a scowling man with forearms like tree trunks and the warm demeanor of a tax audit. The bread is dense, heavy. You could weaponize it. In fact, you once saw a kitchen scuffle end when someone threw a loaf so hard it broke a jug. The taste is fine, until you hit a sour patch. Then it's not fine. Then it's a mystery. Possibly mold. Possibly cheese that wasn't supposed to be cheese. You rip off a piece and dunk it into the mash. This doesn't improve anything, but it gives your jaw something to do. You chew for several minutes. You consider your life choices. You chew some more. Occasionally, if the gods are merciful, or the butcher had an accident, you get a slice of dried fish. It's sharp, salty, and smells like the Nile's armpit on a humid day. But it's protein. You eat it anyway. Bones and all. Because protein. Someone down the table coughs violently. You glance up. It's Kem, the scullery boy. He's trying to swallow his barley mash without water. Rookie mistake. His eyes water. He gasps. The woman beside him smacks his back with the flatbread. It makes a dull thwack like a damp sandal hitting clay. He survives. Yeah. Barely. Speaking of water, there is some. Technically, it's stored in a large ceramic jar near the table. You pour it into your cup and notice a few things floating in it. One is probably a bug. One is definitely a bug. The third might be a fig seed. You drink around them. Hydration is hydration, even when it comes with wings. Sometimes, on feast days or if someone important died, you might get a date. Not a romantic one, obviously. No one here smells romantic. A fruit. A small, sticky, overly sweet date that you savor like it's the last bite of cake on earth. You lick your fingers clean afterward, not because you enjoy it, because the ants will. Let's talk for a moment about table manners. There are none. Servants eat fast, quietly, with purpose. Meals aren't social, they're survival. Your fingers are your utensils, your mouth is your bowl. If it falls on the floor, the 5-second rule becomes the 5-second prayer. You grab it, dust it off, and pretend not to hear the crunch. The flies get bolder as the sun rises. They settle on the rims of bowls, the edges of lips, the corner of your eye. You swat, you miss, you swat again. One lands in your mash. You eat around it. You've made peace with your choices. Sometimes food runs out. You get half portions. Quarter portions. You scrape the bowl. You watch others scrape theirs. You eye their scraps with longing. But you say nothing. Because the moment you beg is the moment you're labeled a beggar, and the palace is never short on labels. On rare days, the kitchen tries something new. Experimentation is dangerous. Last week, they served something called honeyed roots. The name sounded promising. The taste was like wet rope dipped in tree sap. You applauded their creativity with your mouth closed and your expectations lowered. There's also the matter of food safety, which is an anachronistic luxury. You don't have refrigerators, or soap, or thermometers. If meat looks pink, you cook it more. If it smells wrong, you scrape off the surface and hope for the best. One time, you ate something slimy. It tasted fine. You vomited for 2 days. Everyone agreed it was a cleansing ritual. You called it Tuesday. Back in the present moment, you glance down at your bowl. You've eaten all the mash. Your fingers are sticky. Your belly is no longer empty, but it certainly isn't happy. You feel filled, not satisfied, just stuffed with edible disappointment. You wipe your hands on your tunic because napkins haven't been invented yet, and even if they were, you wouldn't get one. You down the last of your buggy water and stand up, your knees creaking like papyrus unfolding in the sun. Someone belches. Someone else sneezes directly into their hand and wipes it on their robe. You pretend not to see it. There are no health inspections here. only divine punishment. As you walk out of the mess hall, your stomach gurgles ominously. You whisper a silent prayer to whichever god oversees digestion and personal dignity. You have survived breakfast. For now. Dressing yourself should be one of life's simple pleasures, a chance to greet the world swathed in soft fabric and clean choices. But you are not living in modern times. You are living in ancient Egypt, in Cleopatra's palace, as a barely noticed servant. And dressing yourself is neither simple nor pleasurable. It is, in fact, an act of minor warfare between your body, gravity, and a pile of linen that smells like old herbs and stress. The first problem is that everything you own is beige. Beige like dust. Beige like old teeth. Beige like that one bowl of barley mash you regret looking too closely at. The ancient Egyptians had access to dyes, yes, rich blues, royal purples, and vivid reds. But those were reserved for people who knew what wine tasted like. You, dear servant, wear the color of sun-bleached desperation. You begin the ritual by peeling off your sleeping tunic. It doesn't come off easily. It clings to your skin like a desperate lover. If your lover was sweaty, ragged, and slightly sour, you tug, twist, and finally wrench it over your head with a sound like parchment tearing. There's a brief moment where it gets stuck around your arms and you consider simply leaving it on and becoming a new kind of linen ghost. But eventually, you prevail. Victory. You're half naked now, standing in your cramped room, swatting at a mosquito with one hand while reaching for the day's attire with the other. Your work tunic is folded nearby. Though folded is a generous word, it's more like slumped, like it fainted from disappointment. You hold it up for inspection. It's wrinkled, of course, stained in at least 3 colors, one possibly pomegranate, one probably oil, and one you'd rather not discuss. The hem is frayed, the neckline is torn. One armpit is ventilated. You put it on anyway, because you must, because your other tunic is still drying after a vinegar rinse that made it smell briefly like pickled feet. The fabric is linen, but not the nice kind, not the smooth, finely woven linen of Cleopatra's gowns or the priest's ceremonial robes. No, yours is rough, coarse, more thread than textile. It scratches, it clings, it shifts with every movement like it's trying to escape your body. You wonder if it knows something you don't. Next come the loincloth bindings, which sound far more exotic than they are. They're just long strips of fabric that you awkwardly wind around your hips, knotting them with the same technique used to secure small animals. The trick is getting them tight enough not to fall down during work, but not so tight they cut off circulation to your future offspring. You twist, tuck, curse, retie. Your fingers fumble through loops and knots until it resembles something vaguely wearable. And you think, yes, this will do. Until you squat down to retrieve your sandals and feel the whole wrap shift ominously southward. You sigh and start over. Ah, the sandals. Crafted from papyrus reeds and worn leather, your sandals are an exercise in optimism. They were designed for desert walking, theoretically, but have since been upgraded by time into instruments of subtle torture. One strap digs into your pinky toe like it has a vendetta. The sole is so thin you can feel every grain of gravel beneath you, like Earth itself is judging your poor life choices. You fasten the strap around your ankle and immediately feel a blister forming. It joins the blister from yesterday. They are now friends, possibly dating. Jewelry? Accessories? You have one, a thin rope bracelet you found near the docks 3 months ago. It's frayed, possibly cursed, but you like how it makes you feel slightly less invisible. You adjust it. It slides back into place. Your fashion statement for the day. I am trying. Your hair, meanwhile, is doing whatever it wants. Ancient Egyptians were big on grooming, at least the wealthy ones. Cleopatra probably spent 3 hours each morning getting oiled, combed, perfumed, and plaited into a state of divine perfection. You, by contrast, use the same wooden comb for your hair and for shooing flies. You attempt to detangle the mass of sun-dried chaos that lives atop your head. It crackles like dry leaves. Bits of sand flake out. You wince, tug. Eventually, you get it to behave, sort of. You tie it back with a strip of old linen and pretend it's a fashion choice. Now comes the most luxurious, and by that we mean unnecessary part of your morning, the cosmetic application. Cleopatra demands her palace staff not only serve, but shimmer. Even the lowest attendants are expected to look passably dusted, so you reach for the communal coal pot. Coal, in theory, is majestic. It's made from ground galena, a mineral that gives your eyes the smoldering, smoky look of someone who's just whispered a prophecy. In practice, it's more like rubbing powdered lead near your eyeballs with a stick. Which is exactly what you do. You dip a twig into the gritty black sludge, then drag it under your eyelids with all the precision of a sleep-deprived raccoon. It stings a little. It always stings. If it doesn't sting, it means it's gone off. You smudge it with your finger, smearing the line until it looks more accidental mystic than poorly rested servant. You blink rapidly. One eye waters. The other just gives up. Finally, you apply a dab of perfumed oil behind your ears. It smells vaguely of myrrh, smoke, and whatever was in the storage room last week. You're not sure if it makes you more appealing or simply masks the fact that you haven't had a full bath since the last solstice. You look at yourself in the polished copper mirror hanging by the door. What you see is not regal, or elegant, or even coherent. You see a linen-wrapped, dust-smudged, sandal-hobbling blur of a human being who somehow looks both too dry and too oily. Your eyes are lined, your tunic is creased, your hair is somewhere between nest and sculpture. You are ready. As you step outside, a breeze kicks up a cloud of sand that immediately embeds itself in your freshly oiled skin. You sigh, already sticky, already itchy, already rethinking your decision to be born at all. A passing noblewoman catches sight of you and wrinkles her nose delicately. Her gown is flowing, her hair braided with gold wire. She smells like a well-funded temple. You bow, of course. She doesn't acknowledge you. Of course. You shuffle on, linen flapping, sandals squeaking slightly with each step. Your look for the day, functional distress with a hint of dirt. Your attitude, resigned. Your next task, something impossible, but at least you're dressed for it. There is a rumor that Cleopatra once had herself rolled up in a carpet and delivered to Julius Caesar. You, however, are more likely to be rolled in a reed mat and dragged out of the way by a supervisor because you're blocking the noble view. That is, if you're lucky enough to avoid being stepped on outright. Welcome to work. Your day begins not with a formal schedule, but with a shouted command echoing from a corridor and a finger jabbed in your direction. There's no good morning, no motivational team huddle, no complimentary fig. There is only your name, mangled, yelled at a volume that suggests a personal grudge, followed by the phrase, "Get the fan." Now you might imagine this refers to a small object, a gentle breeze maker, perhaps a feathered trinket you swish casually in the general direction of royalty. No, it refers to the fan, the ostrich, a 6-foot-tall monstrosity made of papyrus, peacock feathers, and oppression, carried not by magic or pulley, but by you and 3 other unfortunate souls. You each grab a corner and hoist the fan onto your shoulders like a condemned man lifting his own funeral bier. It is heavy. It is fragile. It smells vaguely of bird and incense. You are now officially a breeze. The palace corridors are long, polished, and designed to amplify the suffering of the lower class. Marble underfoot, high ceilings above, every step echoes dramatically. The fan sways with each movement, shedding tiny down feathers that get sucked into your throat with alarming consistency. You cough, silently, because making noise near the royal quarters is discouraged. You know what happened to the last guy who sneezed in front of a visiting dignitary. He's still doing latrine duty. In Nubia, your assigned destination today is the inner garden atrium, where Cleopatra will be taking air for approximately 15 minutes before growing bored and inventing a new ceremony. You arrive early because being late is not a survivable offense, and you stand in place with the fan poised, arms trembling. Cleopatra arrives fashionably, meaning an hour late, with a retinue of perfumed women, eunuch attendants, and at least 2 philosophers who seem unsure whether they're here to be admired or ignored. She settles onto a chaise that costs more than your family's entire ancestral lineage. She says nothing. You wave the fan. Back and forth, back and forth. It is hot. It is always hot. You feel sweat run down your back into the linen of your tunic and pool in places you'd rather not contemplate. Your feet ache. Your arms begin to shake. Your vision wobbles as the midday sun turns everything gold and shimmering and vaguely hostile. Still you wave. Cleopatra makes eye contact with one of her cats. This is considered a religious moment. Everyone stops. You hold the fan steady. The cat blinks. The queen nods. The fan resumes. Your shift ends when Cleopatra decides she's had enough air. which is, of course, just after your shoulder muscles begin to detach from the rest of your body. You carefully lower the fan, cough discreetly into your elbow, and wipe your face on the inside of your tunic where the sweat has already established a small ecosystem. Next up, potions duty. Today, Cleopatra wants her rose water infused with moonlight, hyssop, and exactly 7 crushed pearls. You are sent to the storage chamber to retrieve the ingredients, where you're met with an environment best described as ancient hoarder's pantry. The jars are unlabeled. The shelves tilt slightly, as if in mourning. Everything smells faintly medicinal and also like feet. You find the rose water. You find the pearls. You do not find hyssop. You grab something that looks like hyssop. You hope it's not nightshade. You grind everything with a stone mortar until it resembles a paste and pour it into a bottle etched with the queen's cartouche. You hand it off to the perfume girl, who sniffs it, raises one eyebrow, and says, "This smells like disappointment." You agree silently. Your next job? Washing the floor outside the crocodile pool. Because yes, Cleopatra has a crocodile pool. No, you're not allowed to look directly at the crocodiles. They are sacred. They are vicious. They once ate a visiting ambassador's foot. They are also extremely well fed, which doesn't make you feel any better when one of them blinks at you from the water's edge as you scrub bird droppings from a mosaic depicting Osiris inventing agriculture. The brush you use is made of bundled reeds tied with twine. It scrapes more than it cleans. You scrub until your hands go red and raw. You scrub while nobles stroll past, commenting on your posture like you're a statue on loan from a temple. You scrub while sweat runs down your back, joins your aching feet, and becomes part of the floor you're cleaning. How poetic. Eventually, you're given a break. It lasts 23 minutes. You sit in the shade behind the servant's wing, gnawing on a half-dried fig and staring at a beetle crawling in lazy circles. You try to think of nothing. You try to forget that you still have linen folding and reed mat inventory and possibly cosmetic blending, a task that once left you sneezing glitter for 3 days. One of your fellow servants, Ness, sits beside you and whispers conspiratorially, "Did you hear? The queen is sending another love letter. They say she writes them with her own coal brush." You nod, non-committally. You once accidentally delivered a love letter to the wrong courtier and nearly got assigned to Rat Patrol. Again. After your break, you spend an hour chasing down a missing shipment of juniper berries that were stolen by a monkey. Not metaphorically, an actual monkey. Palace life is absurd like that. The monkey outruns you. The monkey taunts you. The monkey is now wearing your linen sash. You report this. You are told to learn from his confidence. By late afternoon, you are tasked with grinding limestone for cosmetic paste. The powder gets everywhere. Your nose, your ears, between your toes somehow. You sneeze. The sneeze echoes. You hear silence. Then judgment. "Next time, try not to inhale," someone says dryly. You would laugh, but your lungs are full of mineral dust and mild panic. As the sun dips lower and the palace grows cooler, your body screams with exhaustion. Your feet feel like raw papyrus. Your back has developed an opinion. You've been bitten by 3 insects, insulted by 2 noble women, and possibly cursed by a priest who didn't appreciate you stepping on his sacred ibis footprint. But you're still standing, sort of. You finish your final task, untying the ceremonial snake ropes, and trudge back toward the servant quarters. As you pass a polished pillar, you see your reflection. Wild hair, smudged coal, dust-slicked skin, a tunic that has given up trying to hang straight. You look like someone who fought a pyramid and lost. But you're not dead, and in Cleopatra's palace, that's what passes for success. Your skin is burning, not metaphorically, not as a poetic flourish. It is literally, unequivocally burning, and not because of the sun, though Ra's nuclear fury certainly contributes. No, your left forearm is currently sizzling thanks to a dubious home remedy involving garlic, goose fat, and a heated copper spoon that was pressed to your skin earlier by a well-meaning assistant healer named Pashat, who assured you, with alarming confidence, that it would draw the bad wind out. You're not sure what the bad wind is, but if it's not out yet, it's probably just as trapped as you are. The reason for this impromptu exfoliation by fire? A minor cut. Nothing heroic. Nothing poetic, just a sliver from a splintered reed basket during yesterday's linen duty. You thought it would heal. It did not. Now your arm is swollen, red, and oozing something that resembles optimism being slowly crushed under a heel. Welcome to ancient Egyptian medicine. The good news is, they believe in healing. The bad news is, their methods were invented by people who also believed that the brain was just cranial stuffing for the heart. You are led into the servant infirmary, which is not a place of rest and recovery, so much as a slightly less filthy room where pain is both acknowledged and lightly worshipped. The walls are daubed with charms, small painted symbols meant to ward off illness. You recognize the Eye of Horus, drawn in charcoal above the doorway, watching you like a judgmental uncle. The healer greets you with a frown and a sniff. She's old, crooked like a question mark, with fingers permanently stained from whatever unholy paste she's always mixing in her mortar. Her name is Senmut, but most just call her the Mumbler, because her incantations are rapid, rhythmic, and mostly incomprehensible. She inspects your wound, muttering, eyes narrowed. She pokes it with something wooden. You yelp. She nods. Ah, the red snake is coiling. You assume this is metaphorical. You pray it is. Senmut shuffles to a low shelf stacked with dried herbs, fossilized roots, and what might once have been a bird's foot. She pulls down a jar labeled in hieratic scribble, scoops something out with her bare fingers, and slaps it onto your wound. The smell hits you immediately. It is an olfactory attack. Sharp, sour. It smells like vinegar, rotting celery, and vengeance. You gag. That's just the fermenting resin, says Pochette brightly. It stings less if you pretend it's wine. You do not pretend. You just whimper. Next comes the binding ritual. Linen strips soaked in honey and beer are wrapped around your forearm. Honey, at least, has antibacterial properties. That part's legit. The beer is for stickiness, or celebration, or maybe just to confuse the flies, who descend immediately. Senmut waves a hand, smacks a fly directly in front of your face, and resumes wrapping as if nothing happened. During this process, she chants softly, ancient phrases meant to encourage the spirits of healing and discourage the demons of infection. You don't speak much Old Egyptian, but you catch the word puss and something that sounds like nipple of Ra, and frankly, you stop listening after that. You sit still. You breathe slowly. The pain throbs in rhythmic pulses like a second, much angrier heartbeat. But you're not done yet, because in this glorious kingdom of pyramids and plagues, injury is not just a flesh matter. It is a spiritual failing. A young priest in training is summoned. He arrives with a smudged scroll and the unmistakable air of someone who has never done manual labor. He presses a cold palm to your forehead, checks your pulse, and asks if you've recently offended any hippos, owls, or household gods. You tell him no. He nods. Then it must be a blockage in the channels. Oh, good. Channels. Ancient Egyptian anatomy is a wondrous, baffling thing. They believed the body had 22 channels, all of which flowed into the heart. Disease was what happened when these invisible rivers became clogged by evil spirits, swamp gas, or thinking unclean thoughts during eclipse season. The priest recommends a purging enema made of dates, natron, and a generous dollop of crocodile bile. You politely decline. He insists. You lie and say you've already had one today. He accepts this with a nod so serious it deserves a hieroglyph. Eventually, you are allowed to leave the infirmary, but only after being smeared with a thin layer of protective paste, an aromatic blend of frankincense, clay, and something that smells suspiciously like spoiled milk. You are instructed not to wash it off for 3 days. You are also advised to avoid direct sunlight, cats, bread, men named Hori, and laughter. These instructions are vague, but at least you're alive, sort of. You limp back to the servant's wing, clutching your now mummified arm and trying not to brush against anything too solid. The bandage is already sagging. A fly lands on the paste and begins what appears to be an exploratory expedition. You blow at it. It stays. You sit on a stool in the corner and reflect. In modern times, you might have received a sterile dressing, some antibiotics, a tetanus shot, and a lollipop. In Cleopatra's Egypt, you are given incense smoke, fermented glue, and a prayer to the goddess Isis to keep your soul from leaking out through the wound. Still, there's something oddly comforting in the chaos. You are part of a tradition, a long, winding lineage of people who believed illness could be cured with bark, prayer, and a stern talking to from a priest who may or may not understand human anatomy. It's not science, not really, but it is persistent. and deeply, overwhelmingly fragrant. Later, you notice that the swelling has gone down. You also notice your arm now itches with the passion of 1,000 papyrus scrolls unraveling all at once. You consider going back. You do not. You sit very still and try not to think about the red snake. The sun is finally crawling lower in the sky, throwing long golden shadows across the palace grounds, those deceptively tranquil hours between blistering daylight and creeping dusk. You, meanwhile, are still sticky, sore, slightly bandaged, and filled with a kind of existential exhaustion that can only be cured by something hot and comforting. Naturally, you're going to eat instead. Again. But eat may be a strong word for what's about to happen. The evening meal for servants arrives with no fanfare, no clinking of goblets, no soft music, no entertainment save for the usual sound of someone coughing too hard in the corner and another person arguing with a goat. You do not dine. You collect your bowl and sit on a cool slab of stone, knees hugged to your chest, already bracing for disappointment. Tonight's feast, if you're feeling generous, is stew. And by stew, we mean a suspicious liquid with things floating in it. The things are ambiguous. Some kind of grain, possibly lentils, possibly pebbles, a strip of something green and stringy that was at one point a vegetable. There's oil on the surface, shimmering like a promise you know not to believe. The smell is oddly familiar, a mixture of boiled garlic, salt, and the distinct tang of, "We found this behind the granary and decided to give it a second chance." You pick up a hunk of flatbread, fresher than this morning's but still double as a weapon, and use it to scoop up the stew. The bread disintegrates on contact, soggy and limp. You eat it anyway. What else are you going to do? Not eat? The stew is hot. That's something. Not too hot, but enough to remind you it hasn't been sitting out all day collecting flies. Just most of the day. You chew, slowly, methodically. The flavors bloom in your mouth like a fungal colony. Salty, muddled, overcooked lentil, probably, with undertones of ash and something vaguely metallic. You pause to inspect a chunk on your spoon. It's brown, lumpy. You poke it, it squishes. You put it in your mouth and swallow without chewing. You deserve whatever happens next. Someone beside you is laughing. You glance over. It's Nez again, your fellow sufferer, holding up a piece of dried fig like he's found gold. "Only slightly fermented," he grins. "Tastes like vinegar. Want to trade for my radish?" You decline. The last radish you ate had worms. You're still emotionally unpacking that experience. Another servant joins the group, carrying a ceramic jug. It's water. Probably. Might be beer. There's always a chance. The beer is thick, cloudy, and served at body temperature, which is to say it tastes like someone left soup out in the sun and dared you to like it. You take a sip. It's beer. You cough. It's not good beer. It's the kind of beer that was made to avoid death by dehydration, not to enjoy. It's chewy, it has texture, it's gritty, like someone mixed in a teaspoon of sand for balance. You hand the jug back. Someone else drinks without hesitation. Respect. Someone across the mess groans and slams their bowl down. "Again with the dried fish," he yells. You look over. Sure enough, some poor soul has been served what like a half-skeleton of Nile perch. The fish is desiccated. Eyes intact, tail crispy. It looks haunted, possibly vengeful. You remember the last time you ate dried fish. The bones got stuck between your teeth, and your breath smelled like river-bottom nightmares for 3 days. You had dreams about being swallowed by crocodiles. You don't know if they were prophetic, metaphorical, or nutritional side effects. The fish guy eats it anyway. Because hunger. Someone starts a game nearby, guess the mystery route. A fun tradition where you try to identify chunks of plant matter in your meal based on texture, color, and likelihood of survival. The winner gets to scrape the pot for crusted bits. That's the prize. That's where we are. A scrawny cat wanders past, tail high, eyeing your bowl. You swat at it half-heartedly. It's probably better fed than you. Somewhere in the palace, someone is feeding cats mashed duck livers out of golden trays. And here you are, guarding your onion stew hybrid from a feline with zero respect for boundaries. Still, it's not all misery. Sometimes the stew is edible. Sometimes the bread has only a little mold on the bottom. Sometimes you find a clove of roasted garlic, soft and warm and unexpectedly delicious, and it feels like discovering a pearl in the Nile. Tonight, you get a garlic clove. You savor it. You chew slowly. You let the flavor linger, even as a fly lands on your forehead and begins its slow, disrespectful crawl down your temple. You do not swat it. This is your moment. Eventually, you finish your meal. You scrape the bowl with the side of your bread, then lick your fingers clean like a peasant connoisseur. The bowl is passed to a boy with a dirty rag, who may or may not rinse it before someone else eats from it tomorrow. You lean back against the wall, belly full-ish, body tired, brain foggy with carbs and sun. You are not satisfied, you are not nourished, but you are not hungry. And in this life, that is victory. You burp. It tastes like onion and mild regret. You sit in silence as night begins to fall. The sun is gone. The stars are out. The palace glows with torchlight, shadows flickering across courtyards and columns. Somewhere in the noble wing, Cleopatra is feasting on roasted goose, honey cakes, wine steeped with lotus flowers. Somewhere, musicians are playing. Perfumed dancers are twirling. Jokes are being told in languages you can't speak. But here, in the servants' yard, someone is humming an old river song. A cat is purring. The air is cooler now. You can breathe without it sticking to your ribs, and your stomach, for once, has stopped complaining. Tomorrow, you will wake up sore, hungry again, chasing another stew that might be edible, might be cursed, might be mostly sand. But for tonight, you are full. You are still, you are not dead close enough. If you thought your job was stressful, just wait until you learn that your every sneeze, shadow, and footstep is being watched, not just by supervisors and nobles, but by gods, ghosts, and possibly the potted fig tree in the corridor, which definitely wasn't facing that direction yesterday. In Cleopatra's palace, superstition is not a quirk. It is law. It is culture. It is survival. And it's everywhere. You can't swing a beetle without hitting a symbolic amulet, and you'd best hope that beetle doesn't land on the wrong symbol, or you might just curse yourself into your next life as a dung ball. Let's begin with your walk to the linens chamber, already cursed before you take a single step. You reach the threshold and your foot pauses midair. Left foot or right? Right is traditional, but the left avoids invoking Seth, god of chaos, unless it's Wednesday. Then it's reversed. You hesitate. You enter sideways. No one comments. That's just the rules. Above the door is a clay carving of Bez, the squat, lion-faced dwarf god of protection and childbirth. He's everywhere, watching over babies, kitchens, and nervous servants who are one scorpion away from losing their minds. You whisper a little hello to him, just in case. Bez is cranky, but fair. Inside, the linens room is silent. Too silent. The girl beside you spills some oil and gasps. It forms a pattern, a jagged line, a puddle branching just so. It's the tale of Apophis, she whispers, eyes wide. A bad omen. You nod solemnly, even though to you it looks like nothing more than a spilled puddle and a stressful Tuesday. Still, you cross yourself with your fingers and murmur a quick prayer to Thoth, god of wisdom, just in case he's watching. The palace is filled with rituals like this. You must not whistle indoors, it calls the dead. You must not sweep after sunset, it chases away good spirits. You must not eat fish while menstruating, lest Bastet the cat goddess grow offended and smite your digestion. You follow these rules not because you understand them, but because the one person who didn't was later found trying to convince a camel that he was a reincarnated falcon. He's now polishing bricks outside the royal latrine. No one makes eye contact with him. Religious practice in the palace is both omnipresent and deeply performative. There are temples, of course, magnificent ones, carved into stone, perfumed and draped in silks. But you don't go there. Servants like you practice in quiet corners, whispering to statues carved from broken pottery, or chalking protective symbols onto the inside of your sleeping mat. One girl you know keeps a piece of sacred ibis feather in her sandal. It stinks. She won't remove it. Her cousin survived a snake bite last year. Coincidence? She asks. No one answers. There are official gods, Ra, Osiris, Isis, Anubis, Hathor, each with their elaborate temples, priests, and daily offerings. Then there are the smaller ones, the spirits of old servants, kitchen gods, stairwell ghosts. You never name them, but you nod when you pass the cracked statue with no face in the storage room. You avoid touching the green-tinted basin in the bathhouse. You never ever step on the mosaic of the lotus flower near the queen's chamber. Someone did once. 3 days later, they got a rash and were told it was divine punishment. Could have been the stew, but we're not risking it. You personally carry a scarab charm. Cracked, worn smooth, passed down by someone whose name is lost. You rub it when you're anxious, which is always. Once a week, when the moon is fat and judgmental, you visit the old laundry woman, Tia, who knows the real prayers. She's not a priestess, but she whispers in riddles and leaves bowls of milk outside the door for the ones who knock. You don't ask questions. You just nod and drink the tea she offers, which tastes like ash and burned fruit, but seems to help with your bad dreams. Speaking of dreams, they matter. Dreams are messages from gods, ancestors, the snake that lives in your spine. You once dreamed you were drowning in grain. The next morning, the granary caught fire. Everyone looked at you differently after that. You walk a little more carefully now, and then of course there's the watching. Not the gods, not the ghosts, each other. The palace is a gold-plated surveillance state fueled entirely by gossip, paranoia, and a liberal sprinkling of incense. Everyone is watching everyone else. For signs. For flaws. For failings. If you trip, someone will whisper you're cursed. If you smile too much, they'll assume you made a pact with something dark and benevolent. If you cry, especially publicly, you'd better have a good reason, or someone will smear crushed beetle across your cheeks and tell you it's for balance. There's a list, an actual list, of servants who are suspected of being unlucky, or too lucky, or both. It's updated weekly by a man named Happy, who has taken it upon himself to be the moral compass of the linen wing. You're not on the list, yet. You try very hard to stay medium. Not too clumsy, not too graceful. You aim for beige. Spiritually, emotionally, behaviorally. You aim for the spiritual equivalent of toast. But even that's not foolproof. You once laughed at a joke about a priest tripping over a goat. The next day, the lamp above your bed cracked for no reason. Coincidence? Maybe. Or maybe the goat has friends. And don't even get started on omens. Bird flying left? Bad news. Dog howling at sunset? Someone nearby is dying. Sneeze before noon? Someone speaking your name. Probably wrong. Probably with malice. You start your mornings with a glance at your own urine. Color, steam, trajectory, all important. Your friend claims she can read the future in tea leaves. You've never seen tea leaves. You nod supportively anyway. And still, despite it all, you live. You tie charms around your ankle. You whisper the names of minor gods into corners. You burn oils when you can steal them. Mark your arms with chalk sigils when no one is looking. Not because you believe, exactly. But because belief isn't the point. Insurance is. After all, in a world where sandals break without warning, stew turns rancid in the blink of an eye, and cats are worshipped more than humans, a little extra cosmic coverage can't hurt. Especially when your entire life depends on forces you'll never fully understand. Still watching the ceiling? Still awake? Then say a quick thank you to Thoth for memory, Bastet for protection, and Bes for whatever Bez does. It seems rude not to. You're alive today. Let's not get cocky. After a full day of royal eyebrow oil application, accidental partial blindness from crushed galena powder, and being bitten by a goose in front of 4 nobles and a dog with better dental care than you'd think you'd be entitled to a little you time. Something leisurely, something soul-restoring. Perhaps something fun. That would be adorable. But leisure here in Cleopatra's palace is a complex beast. It exists, yes, but only if you're lucky, subtle, or fast enough to avoid being spotted with free time. Because the moment you look idle, someone will remember an urgent task that absolutely cannot be completed unless you personally carry 20 jugs of water up a slope while chanting, "Oh, sacred lotus," to the rhythm of your own foot blisters. Still, every now and then you manage to steal a moment. And in those moments, you remember, fun is a stretch. Let's start with the approved activities, those that won't result in punishment or public shaming. There's board games, like Senet, an ancient precursor to backgammon, played with carved sticks, painted stones, and rules no one quite agrees on. You've played it. You've lost repeatedly. You suspect your opponent, a boy named Har, cheats with divine favor, or sleight of hand, or both. There's also storytelling, passed mouth to mouth like a warm cup of fermented gossip. Your favorite is the one about the merchant who tried to smuggle a sacred ibis across the Nile and ended up bald and covered in boils. It's part cautionary tale, part comedy, part accidental hygiene pamphlet. It always gets a laugh. Except from the ibis handlers. Music drifts through the palace in the evenings. Soft flutes, hand drums, the occasional lyre, plucked by someone more enthusiastic than talented. You listen while pretending to sweep. Music, at least, feels like magic that doesn't require incense or goat entrails. Sometimes you hum, sometimes you sway, sometimes you step on a shard of broken amphora and bleed into the rhythm. That's called multitasking. But let's not pretend these moments are restful, because all around you is law, visible, invisible, and all-consuming. Cleopatra may rule the land, but her palace is ruled by etiquette, hierarchy, and unspoken rules so dense they might as well be carved on temple walls. There are laws against theft, of course, but theft can mean many things. Take an extra fig? Theft. Borrow someone's reed comb? Theft. Look directly at a noble's sandals for too long? Visual theft. Possibly treason. And while Egypt has a legal system, judges, scribes, trials, it's important to remember that if you're a servant, your trial is likely to be a very fast conversation with a man holding a stick. The stick always wins. Punishments vary, and they are rarely subtle. For minor offenses, you may be reassigned to latrine duty, dung collection, or the always popular mosquito control by the palace's stagnant lotus ponds. Translation: stand there and be bitten instead of someone more important. For moderate offenses, public humiliation. One servant was recently made to wear a goat mask for an entire day after spilling oil in front of a diplomat. Another had to stand in the garden repeating, "I will not call the queen's perfume aggressively floral," for 6 hours. Then there's beating, still favored by supervisors who enjoy the nostalgic charm of direct physical trauma. A few lashes, a few bruises, a few new religious beliefs, nothing personal. Just policy. The worst punishment, though, is exile from the palace kitchens. You laugh, but only until you've tried eating street market fish with no salt. If you're not in trouble, and you've done your work, and the stars align just so, you may be permitted to watch a performance. Tonight, for example, the Queen has invited guests to witness a court juggler. You don't get to see him directly, of course. You hide behind a pillar, peering through the carved lotus lattice like a mouse attending opera. The juggler is nimble, theatrical, shirtless in a way that's clearly causing tension among the noblewomen. He balances clay pots on his elbows, tosses knives, swallows a coin, and recites a hymn to Isis while upside down. You clap silently. You are then noticed by a senior scribe and reassigned to fetch water. The fun is over. Sometimes, your fun is even less structured. There's eavesdropping, which you've perfected into an Olympic sport. You've learned more about Cleopatra's romantic entanglements than you know about your own family. You know who's being considered for a new post, who's been caught sneaking wine, who walked barefoot into the queen's private chamber and now has to recite hymns for forgiveness while dressed as a jackal. You collect these stories like sacred amulets. Other times, you gamble. Not with money, because you have none. You gamble with favors, shifts, secrets. 1 bread roll now in exchange for 2 in 3 days. A turn carrying the fan in exchange for 3 lice treatments. The stakes are high, the rewards are stale, but it keeps the mind sharp. And then there's gossip, the true lifeblood of palace entertainment. It spreads faster than fever, sticks harder than resin, and burns longer than a papyrus fire. Cleopatra is pregnant. No, she isn't. She's in love with a Roman, or maybe a Greek, or maybe both. One of them might be magical, or cursed. She once turned a man to stone with her glare, or her perfume, or because he touched her cat without permission. Is any of it true? No idea. That's not the point. The point is that for a moment, while whispering in the dark, while laughing behind the washroom, while gasping over someone else's poor choices, you forget you are aching, hungry, and a bit on fire from yesterday's healing balm. And finally, as night fully falls, there's the fire pit. This is your favorite. A small group of servants sits around it every few nights, those who aren't working late or hiding from punishment. They share stories, roasted chickpeas, bad jokes, someone plays a flute badly, someone sings off-key, someone accidentally sets part of their robe alight. There is yelling, there is laughter, there is extinguishing. It is messy. It is imperfect. It is human. And in the flickering light of that fire, with your head resting against a crumbling column and your knees drawn to your chest, you allow yourself the dangerous luxury of something close to peace. Tomorrow, someone will trip. Someone will spill. Someone will anger the queen's cat or cough on a priest. Tomorrow there will be no leisure. But tonight? Tonight you are warm. Tonight you are laughing. Tonight you remember that even in the grimiest, cruelest corners of history, people still found ways to be absurd. There is a whisper that drifts through the halls of Cleopatra's palace. It flits between linen storerooms and perfumed antechambers, weaving itself into laundry lines and behind bronze mirrors. It's not a breeze, it's not even audible really, but it's there. Love, it says, and then it laughs. Long, low, bitter. Because if you're a servant in ancient Egypt, especially in this palace, romance is not a concept, it's a hazard. Let's begin by stating the obvious. You don't date. There's no romantic stroll by the Nile, no flirty glances over communal stew, no meet-cute involving dropped scrolls and shared laughter. No one sending you love poems etched into papyrus and tied with lotus stems. The only thing being tied with lotus stems around here is your dignity. Love, for people like you, is a transaction, a negotiation, a dowry meeting behind a goat stall if you're lucky. And if you're not, it's a marriage arranged for labor consolidation. Your family needs someone to help harvest barley? Congratulations, you're betrothed back from the fishmonger's hut. He smells like fermented trout and moral apathy. You will now share one mat and 7 blisters. That's not to say attraction doesn't exist. Oh, it very much exists, but acting on it is delicate. In the palace, hierarchy is everything, and love is just another lever of power. If a higher-ranking servant flirts with you, it's not because they admire your personality. It's because they've noticed you're small enough to manipulate and too exhausted to resist. And if a noble flirts with you, well, first, check that no one's watching. Then, if you're sensible, run, because the line between attention and disaster is thinner than the thread holding your tunic together. More than one servant has disappeared after being noticed by someone too powerful to refuse. One day they're brushing wigs and arranging jewelry trays. The next, they're gone. Their name whispered in the baths, their absence covered by vague statements like, "She was transferred to the granary in Thebes." You've seen it happen, and still, you feel things. Because you are human, annoyingly so. There's a boy in the linens room, Amun, with kind eyes and a laugh like spilled honey. He once slipped you an extra piece of dried fig during rationing. You think about it more often than you'd like to admit. You've never spoken beyond murmured greetings and shared smirks when someone drops a basket of freshly laundered loincloths, but still, there's something. Last week, your fingers brushed while passing a comb. Your heart did a small dramatic performance. Then the overseer barked and you both scattered like startled cats. That was the end of it. For now. Sometimes, though, you see love stories unfold. Not the noble kind. Not the Cleopatra and Caesar kind, with their gilded barges and perfume-stained love letters. You see the servant kind. The kind where a couple pretends to get water from the same well, even though one of them just came back. The kind where someone leaves a carved scarab in someone else's sandals. The kind whispered in the dark, behind baskets, under moonlight, filtered through cracked mud brick. These romances are secret, fragile, carved from scraps of time and risk. They are born in shared punishments, stolen glances, and the quiet agreement that we could get in trouble for this, and it would still be worth it. But more often than not, they end in heartbreak, or worse, betrothal to someone else entirely. Because when it comes time to marry, love is rarely consulted. Instead, arrangements are made. Your cousin married a man who looked like a poorly dressed falcon. He had 3 goats, 2 teeth, and 1 goal: acquire a wife with strong arms for grinding grain. They barely spoke before the wedding. They still don't. But their barley yields are phenomenal, and she's pregnant with her 3rd child, so everyone says it's going very well. You nod, you smile, you whisper congratulations, you pretend that doesn't terrify you. The wedding itself was loud. In ancient Egypt, even the poorest marriages get ceremony. Clay jars of beer, bread shaped into hearts, musicians if you're lucky, drunk uncles if you're not. There are oaths, solemn promises to share water, sandals, and suffering. There's incense. There's a blessing from a priest who looks vaguely bored. There's the throwing of dates, which sounds festive until one hits you in the eye. And then there's the consummation, immediate, expected, and not particularly private. You're given a mat and a small crowd of relatives loitering just far enough away to pretend they aren't listening. Romantic, no? And yet somehow people still seek each other out. Even in this dusty palace, beneath layers of sweat, superstition, and the crushing weight of unpaid labor, people still crave connection. A hand lingering too long on a shoulder, a quiet look passed across the steaming bread ovens. Two servants brushing against each other in the spice storeroom and neither pulling away. Is it love? Is it longing? Is it boredom with a hint of heat stroke? Who's to say? You once heard of two scribes who ran away together. They vanished one morning, left behind their ink pots, their assignments, and a trail of sandal prints leading down to the Nile. Some say they drowned, others say they made it to a farm in the Delta. The truth doesn't matter, the story does. Because sometimes, in the middle of this hot, relentless, absurd life, it's comforting to imagine that somewhere, somehow, someone gets a happy ending, even if it's just two overworked scribes writing their own story. Still awake? Still holding out hope? You're not alone. Someone else in this timeline once believed love was possible. They were probably punished, but briefly before that, they smiled. If you're picturing childhood in Cleopatra's palace as a whimsical parade of skipping, laughing little cherubs adorned in linen togas and flower garlands, please stop. Immediately. You're embarrassing yourself. Childhood in this era is not a protected sanctuary of learning and exploration. It is a brief, sticky training montage for adulthood, interrupted occasionally by illness, accidents involving goats, and alarming conversations about your future responsibilities, before your adult teeth have even settled. And in the servant class, childhood lasts until you can lift a jug without falling over, which is, frankly, sooner than you'd think. Your first memory may not be of your parents' faces or a favorite toy, but of being handed a tiny broom and told not to leave any footprints after sweeping. You were 4. You cried once. That was your lunch break. Let's begin with the daily reality of a palace child. You wake up early, before the sun reaches the courtyard, not because you're an industrious go-getter, but because you're sleeping next to 3 siblings and someone always wets the bed. That someone might be you. You'll never admit it. Your bedding is shared, itchy, and often home to a rotating cast of lice. The moment your feet hit the floor, you're useful. Immediately. There is no cartoon rooster, no morning snack, no quiet moment of existential reflection. There is shouting. There is cold water. There is, why isn't this child already polishing something? Your tasks vary depending on your size. If you're small, you clean things under other things, pots, tables, animal feet. If you're medium, you carry water jars that are slightly too heavy, which is the perfect way to build character and chronic back pain. If you're tall, congratulations, you now have the honor of helping with actual palace labor, such as hauling linens, restocking oils, or being yelled at by adult supervisors who think learning on the job means survive or die, small version of a person. There is no formal schooling. The idea of a classroom would be laughable if you had enough energy to laugh. Instead, you learn by watching. Watching your mother knead bread, watching your uncle mix perfumes, watching the steward beat your cousin with a sandal for breaking a jar. These are your textbooks. These are your teachers. Reading and writing? Reserved for scribes, and scribe training is for the elite or their gifted favorites. Occasionally, a palace child shows promise. They're taken aside, whispered about, given a broken stylus and a scrap of papyrus. You've tried to mimic the signs you've seen. Once you wrote what you thought was the word for sun. It turned out to be unclean. Someone washed your mouth out with river water. You haven't tried since. Toys? Don't be ridiculous. You might find a carved stick shaped like a crocodile, or roll pebbles down a slope while pretending they're scarabs in a race. But most play involves whatever you can do quietly and without interfering with adult business. The game of don't blink while balancing a basket on your head is a common pastime. The prize is not being shouted at. Some children fashion dolls out of clay and reeds. You had one once. You named her Nettie. She had no arms, but she had ambitions. She vanished during laundry week. You still think about her sometimes. Older children, meaning 9 and up, because time moves differently here, are already functioning adults in every way that matters. They haul baskets, knead dough, carry messages, watch over younger siblings, and lie to the supervisors with remarkable skill. Your friend Kipa is 12. She works in the kitchens and has the posture of a 40-year-old blacksmith. She once killed a rat with a ladle. She still brags about it. You think she deserves a statue. Of course, this is all assuming you survive long enough to become a teenager. Let's not sugarcoat this. Child mortality is brutal. Infections, heat stroke, bad water, mean-spirited goats, you name it, kids have died from it. There's no pediatrician, no vaccinations, no call the healer, unless your fever involves prophetic dreams or levitation. You watch children disappear from the servant's wing like sighs on the wind. No one says anything. There's too much work to do. You remember your brother. He had a cough, a dry one at first, then wet, then quieter, then nothing. Your parents said he was called to serve in the field of reeds. You found his toy lion under the mat a week later. You didn't cry. You just buried it in the dirt by the wall. If a child does survive into adolescence, they are married off early, often by 15, sometimes to someone older, sometimes much older, sometimes someone they've never met. It's not romantic, it's strategic. Families unite their workloads. Children become wives, wives become mothers. Mothers become hollow-eyed ghosts with 4 jobs and no sleep. But sometimes, amidst all this, childhood still leaks through. You once saw 2 kids sliding down the temple steps on a flattened basket, shrieking with laughter until a guard chased them off. You've watched little girls braid each other's hair with scraps of ribbon they found in the noble wing. You've heard the rhythmic clack of shells being played in the corner, some made-up game with no winners and far too many rules. Sometimes, when no one's watching, you dance. Just a little. Just enough to remind yourself you haven't forgotten how. Because even in a world that treats children like miniature beasts of burden, there are moments. Brief, fluttering sparks of joy, silliness, and defiance. You cherish them. They are rare. They are fragile. They are yours. And tomorrow, you'll be expected to carry firewood without spilling a single ember, help your mother scrub urine from the floor near the Queen's favorite cat, and assist with the embalming of a pigeon that died under mysterious circumstances. But tonight, you pretend your sleeping mat is a boat and you are floating down the Nile with a clay lion and a full belly. Tonight, for just a moment, you're a child. It begins with a sound, a low, deliberate thud near your head just as you're drifting into a moment of fragile, stolen sleep. You freeze. You pray it's a dream. It is not a dream. It is a rat. More specifically, it is a palace rat, a subspecies of ancient Egyptian rodent that has developed, through exposure and adversity, the confidence of a demigod and the audacity of a tax collector. It lands on your mat with all the grace of a sack of amphora, sniffs your ear, and waddles away thoroughly unimpressed by your shivering humanity. Welcome to the blurry, poorly defined ecosystem of animals in Cleopatra's palace, where some creatures are considered divine, some are tolerated, and some are whispered about in the dark with fear and respect. And the tricky part? Sometimes they're the same animal. Let's start with the sacred cats. Cats in Egypt aren't just pets. They're avatars of Bastet, goddess of home, fertility, and protective vengeance. Harming a cat, even accidentally, is punishable by death, shame, or at the very least, a week of garbage collection duty in the hot wing of the palace where the pigeon bones go to die. There are dozens of cats slinking about the halls of Cleopatra's residence. Some are official palace cats, with collars, golden bells, and better grooming than any human in your social bracket. Others are freeloaders, technically strays, but treated with the same reverence as papyrus scrolls containing royal secrets. You don't touch them, you worship them, from a distance. With snacks, they are lean, sleek, and breathtakingly judgmental. One in particular, a long-legged tabby named Senept, has taken a liking to napping in the oil storeroom. You once tried to move her with a soft st. She opened one eye and stared at you with the intensity of 1,000 curses. You apologized. She stayed. You backed away. Now let's descend the social ladder to the palace dogs. Less sacred than cats, but still respected, especially the hunting breeds kept by nobles and military officials. Sleek hounds with names like Windwalker or Tooth of Horus parade through the courtyards wearing polished collars. They do not bark, they judge. Then there are the working dogs, scruffier, louder, usually named things like Stick or Not Yours. These are the mutts that guard storerooms, chase thieves, and occasionally eat a sandal if it's left unattended too long. You like them more, because they're honest. Then, the goose. There is always a goose. Her name is Menhat. She belongs to no one, She owns the East Courtyard. Everyone fears her. She hisses at nobles. She has pecked 2 scribes and 1 ambassador. Cleopatra thinks she's hilarious. You think she's the devil with feathers. You gave her your lunch once just to avoid another ankle ambush. She honked in approval. Monkeys? Yes. There are monkeys. A pair of capuchins lives near the Queen's private gardens. They wear decorative sashes and eat better than you. One of them stole your hair wrap last week. You've never fully recovered. Now let's shift into the shadows. Because for every divine animal lounging on a velvet pillow, there is a vermin cousin chewing through your life. Rats. Not just any rats. Intelligent rats. They understand doors. They organize raids. They once formed a pyramid out of grain sacks to reach a hanging fig basket. You watched them. You didn't interfere. You respect innovation. You sometimes think they've formed a society with laws, possibly elections. Then there are the mice. Smaller, quieter, almost cute until they scuttle across your toes in the dark and trigger an existential scream you must quickly muffle with your tunic sleeve to avoid being reassigned to feather-plucking duty. You've developed a ranking system. If it's smaller than your thumb, you let it live. If it looks at you like it knows your secrets, you light incense. If it crawls into your sleeping mat, you burn the mat. Beetles are another frequent companion. Not just the sacred scarabs, the stylized ones pressed into jewelry and stamped into wax, but the real ones. The crawling, crunching, kitchen-invading kind. They show up in your flour. They show up in your shoes. They once showed up in your soup. You did not finish the soup. Some people say the beetles bring luck. Some people say the beetles are listening. You never speak secrets near the beetles. Now the lice. Ah, lice. They are your true companions. They live in your hair, your clothes, possibly your soul. You scratch without thinking now, behind the ears, at the nape of your neck. You've named the biggest one Tothis. He has survived 3 delousings and 2 vinegar rinses. You think he may be immortal. There are flies, of course. Endless flies. They gather on the rim of your water jug and the corner of your mouth at the same time. You've swallowed at least 7. You think one waved at you as it went in. Also scorpions. Yes, scorpions. Tiny, quiet, malicious. They hide in sandals, in pots, in beds. One servant woke up to find one curled behind her ear like a sarcastic earring. She didn't scream. She just stood up, very slowly, walked outside, and sat in the water basin for 3 hours. They say that means she's blessed now. You believe it means she's broken. And yet, for all their horror, these animals are your constant companions. You talk to them. You shoo them. You fear them. You sometimes feed them when no one is watching. Because here in this chaotic ecosystem of fur, feather, stinger, and claw, you understand your place. You are not top of the food chain. You are not sacred. You are not divine. You are another creature in the palace ecosystem, clinging to survival, nesting in the margins, scratching at things you can't quite see. You and the rat are not so different. You both keep secrets, you both dodge supervisors, you both know how to chew through rope in a pinch. Still awake? Still twitching? Try not to think about what just brushed your ankle. It was probably sacred, or it was Tothis saying goodnight. You may think you know heat. You may have once complained that your apartment AC was broken for 2 days in August, or that the sidewalk was like totally melting your flip-flops. How quaint, how fragile, how adorably modern of you. Because until you've stood in the courtyard of Cleopatra's palace at noon, with the sun boiling the white stone beneath your feet like it's a sacrificial offering, you do not know heat. The Egyptian sun is not your friend. It is not warm, or glowing, or generous. It is a cosmic mallet, beating down on you with no concern for your comfort, your water content, or your will to live. It doesn't shine. It assaults. There is no shade. Not really. There are hints of it. Long, thin strips beside a colonnade, brief mercies offered by passing shadows of cranes or lazily drifting banners. But most of the time, the light wraps around corners, bends under eaves, and hunts you like a golden predator. Your tunic is soaked before breakfast. By lunch, it's dry again. Not because the heat has eased, but because your sweat has evaporated directly into the sun's mouth. You have learned to embrace dampness as a lifestyle. You once left a ceramic bowl in the courtyard for 15 minutes. It cracked. The air inside it got hotter than the bowl itself. That bowl was Cleopatra's. You still have nightmares. Your sandals, worn, cracked, pitiful, offer no defense. The stone underfoot radiates so much heat it burns through the soles. There are literal footprints scorched into the dirt paths near the stables from when a servant tried to sprint barefoot from the kitchens to the baths. His reward? A lesson in humility and 3 blisters that look like angry gods. And then there's wind. Not cooling wind. Not romantic wind. No Marilyn Monroe breeze playfully flipping your tunic. This is sand-laced wind. Abrasive. Sharp. Every gust, a low-grade exfoliation you didn't consent to. It howls through corridors, whips through sheets left to dry, and fills every uncovered vessel with grainy defiance. You cannot escape the sand. It gets in your eyes, your ears, your stew. You've stopped trying to remove it from your teeth. You're fairly certain your dreams are now sponsored by sandstone. But sometimes, the sky changes, and that's somehow worse. Because when the wind stops, and the sun darkens behind distant clouds, and the air goes still, you know what's coming. The storm. It begins as a whisper, leaves rustling in a pattern that feels wrong, as though the trees are conspiring. Then the light shifts, the sky turns the color of bruised papyrus, and a kind of quiet falls over the palace that is not peace, it is suspense. Then comes the wall. Sandstorm, it moves like a wave, an ochre curtain devouring the horizon. Servants run. Nobles vanish inside. You are told to cover the windows, even though they don't really have glass, just slats and wishful thinking. You drag a linen sheet over your head, crouch in a doorway and wait. It hits like a scream. The wind roars. Sand pours in through every crack. You press fabric to your mouth and still taste grit. The palace shakes. Somewhere, a statue loses its nose. Cats vanish. The courtyard fountain becomes a muddy swirl of shattered lotus petals and drowned bugs. You are not allowed to speak. The storm will hear you. Afterwards, everything is different. The ground is layered in red dust. The corridors feel older. You are older. You cough and spit brown for days. But heat and sandstorms are only half the horror. Because Cleopatra's palace may be drenched in gold and honey, but it has seasons. And when the sun disappears long enough, when the Nile withdraws like a moody cat, and the wind comes from the north instead of the desert, you meet an even rarer terror. Cold. Egyptian cold isn't European cold. There's no snow, no woolen mittens, no fireside cocoa. Egyptian cold is worse, because it's unexpected. The walls aren't built for it. The clothing isn't thick enough. The nights feel like betrayal. The stone floors that baked your feet now chill your bones. Your linen tunic, threadbare and perfumed with disappointment, becomes a thin flag of surrender. You sleep curled in a ball, wearing every cloth you own, and still wake up with frozen toes. One winter night, your breath fogged in the air. You thought it was a ghost. It wasn't. It was your lungs protesting. There's no central heat. There's no extra blanket. You huddle beside the kitchen fire, surrounded by other miserable humans and at least 3 palace cats who claim they are there for spiritual warmth. You believe them? You're too cold to argue. And then, rain. A rare miracle. A terrifying event. Palace roofs are not designed for rain. They weep. You once saw the mosaic in Cleopatra's main hall bubble under pressure and lift like skin. The smell? Wet stone, mildew, and the slow, creeping realization that none of this is waterproof. The garden floods. Frogs appear. The sacred ibis struts with renewed arrogance. Everything becomes slippery. Someone breaks their ankle on a wet step and is told to reflect on the spiritual symbolism of that. You wrap your feet in old linen and pray to no longer feel your toes. Through it all, the sky watches. Silent. Judging. It does not care if you're a queen or a chamber pot scrubber. It rains on everyone. It scorches equally. It floods the mud brick homes of priests and sweeps the refuse of the poor into the same river that carries Cleopatra's perfume-laced bathwater. The weather here is not romantic. It is a bully. It is a teacher. It is a reminder that the gods are in charge. And you, servant of the palace, fan-wielder of the mighty, are just another soft, fleshy mortal wrapped in slowly disintegrating linen. Still awake? Then bless your soul. May the breeze be mild, the sun merciful, and the rat currently chewing your sandal be at least open to negotiation. By now, your body aches. Not in a poetic, soul-searching way. Not in the way a noble might complain about stiffness after reclining too long during a banquet. No. You ache like something that's been chewed and spit out by the Nile herself. Your back is a twisted tapestry of pulled muscles. Your feet are blistered. Your hands are raw. Your mind is frayed like the edge of a woven reed mat, fraying more with every hour you remain conscious. And so, as the sun dips below the horizon, staining the palace in a syrupy gold that is far too beautiful for how much you smell right now, you do what every creature in this gilded hellscape does. You look for a corner to collapse in. But first, of course, comes the final rituals. The queen has retired, which means all is quiet, in theory, except the halls echo with whispers and someone is weeping softly over a broken amphora. You avoid eye contact. You've done your work. You're not responsible, unless someone says you are. Dinner, or what remains of it, has been cleared. You salvaged half a fig, and what might have been a chunk of cheese or a heavily fossilized lump of garum. You're not sure. You ate it anyway. Your stomach is making noises that resemble distant thunder. That's just how digestion works now. You wash your hands in a shallow bowl shared by 5 other people. The water is symbolic, more than functional. It smells vaguely of rose oil and entirely of despair. You wipe your hands on your tunic and hope the grime stains blend into the rest. And now, sleep. Or so you think. Because sleep, dear one, is not a guarantee. It is a gamble. First, you must secure your sleeping spot. There is no assigned bedding in your station, only turf wars. You arrive to find your usual mat occupied by a child who is either unconscious or pretending to be. You consider removing them. You consider the effort. You choose peace. You lay yourself down on a thin reed mat tucked into a shadowy alcove, your head resting on a bundle of laundry that absolutely does not belong to you. It's slightly damp. You don't question why. You close your eyes. And then the real parade begins. Because nothing keeps a servant of Cleopatra's palace awake quite like the specter of death. It's not even abstract. It's literal. You've seen it. You've smelled it. You remember the stable boy who caught a fever last month. He was healthy, strong, barely older than you. One morning he coughed. By sundown he was gone. His body was wrapped in linen and left near the rear gate, awaiting priestly attention. You heard the flies before you saw them. They said it was a chill from working in wet clothes, or a spirit, or divine punishment for looking directly at one of Cleopatra's mirrors. No one really knows. And so everyone whispers, everyone waits, everyone scans their skin for spots, everyone checks their breath for irregularity. You've grown used to hearing someone cough and silently preparing their obituary. Your own health? Questionable. Your left ear has been ringing since noon. Your joints pop when you stand. There's a rash on your inner elbow shaped like a vulture, which seems ominous. You mentioned it to the kitchen healer. She offered a paste made of crushed mint, honey, and goat tears. You applied it. The rash laughed at you. But you sleep anyway, because sleep is the only escape, the only mercy. And so you curl up, knees tucked, arms crossed, trying to ignore the sounds, the scratching of beetles, the soft patter of cat paws, the distant scream of some creature being eaten by another creature. Nature's bedtime symphony. And just as your mind begins to slip, you remember the funeral. Not yours, not yet. One of the senior servants died last season, an old man named Hotep, who once said he remembered Cleopatra's father. He passed in his sleep, peacefully they say. Though his face was frozen in what looked like surprise, his body was wrapped as tradition demands. Eyes sealed with wax, tongue removed, organs removed, heart weighed, liver, well, who really knows what happened to the liver? Some say it was eaten by a jackal priest. You attended the procession. Candles, perfume, weeping, and then the river took him. Now he is somewhere in the field of reeds, or so they tell you. You try not to think about how many other servants died this year, how many names you've forgotten, how many mats have gone unclaimed. You try not to think about your own mat one day becoming available. You dream of escaping. You dream of not being here, of another life. One with cushions, and soap, and medicine that doesn't involve leeches and divine guesswork. One where your death certificate isn't just someone muttering, "He looked tired," and then setting your body on fire. But for now, you sleep. Because the palace is quiet, and the stars above Giza glow like forgotten gods, and the night is warm, not too warm, and you are, for the moment, unbitten. You close your eyes, you let the rot of history lull you to sleep. You forget the queen, you forget the rats, you forget the aching in your spine. You become breath, you become silence. You become part of the palace floor. And if you do not wake, well, it was a long day, and in Cleopatra's palace, that's already a miracle. Good night. Sleep tight. Don't let the sacred beetles whisper your name to the underworld.